Welcome back, viewers. I'm on with Peter Wickham. We're discussing politics and whether or not incidents in one's private life should become a public discussion because you're a politician, or should it just be left alone? Welcome back. Now, let's turn our attention to Grenada now and to our favorite topic, really, Peter. The opposition leader in Grenada now, former Prime Minister Keith Mitchell, going through a divorce that became public because he was served papers at the Houses of Parliament. The House of Representatives was meeting. He was there. The bailiff went to serve him the papers. He did not react well, and so it became a media event, and it went public and viral. But now there's a question of whether or not people should even concern themselves with whether or not such a high-profile politician is getting a divorce. It's a bit messy because his wife is claiming tyranny. It's a story of domestic abuse. She's claiming tyranny, but some feel, well, you know what? It's not the public's business. Is there any context where it becomes a public business, particularly when we see a not too nice side of his character being outlined in the divorce in the court documents, of the way he's treating this woman that he's trying to exit from, locking the house and all of that kind of thing. Does it tell us anything, and or should we just leave this alone?
Yeah, because I listened to your conversations with another journalist, and I thought about this issue a lot in preparation for today. I think I also look at the precedent, which would be when Arthur, when he divorced his wife, Beverly Arthur, while he was Prime Minister of Barbados, and the way that became messy, to the point where a journalist attempted to follow him to Miami, where the divorce was being settled, boarded the plane, sat next to him, and he reacted badly in pretty much the same way that Dr. Mitchell has reacted now. I have an issue with the extent to which the press is often interested in these issues. And Callistra, I must say that I think in this instance, I wonder whether we are not too interested in the matter of whether or not Dr. Mitchell is, and the where and the how in relation to in which is being done. I've seen on occasion in Barbados and across the Caribbean where people seek divorces, and the salacious nature of the conditions and the grounds that they ask for divorces is essentially intended clearly to scandalize. It presents the most unsavory aspect of a marriage. And I've seen it in court filings, reference to impotence and other things which the reader will obviously be scandalized by, and the intention is to get even on the part of a partner. And in many instances, it ignores a marriage that has gone on sometimes for many years and has produced many good things. But the focus is on getting even in a situation like that. And I'm not saying this is what Dr. Mitchell's wife is doing, right? Personally, I would have preferred if she had pursued her divorce in New York, where it would have had equal implication for what happened in Grenada. But again, it would have been out of the public eye. Presumably, her lawyers knew what they were doing by serving it in Grenada. And then the question of the bailiff. I mean, he's a public figure. His address is known. His location where he stays, even if he isn't living at the marital home, is known. And he's all over the place. The question is, do you need to serve him in Parliament on an occasion when all of the necessary media eyes are on him? So in his defense, I think that there is a lot that is being done to scandalize. And I accept that is unfortunate in the context of a person who is Prime Minister. But, I would say to Dr. Mitchell, when you're no longer Prime Minister, all of these are the things that happen to you. And people believe that the power of the Prime Minister, some of it can carry forward. And I think that part of the reason that you understand now why a person does not want to relinquish the job, because when you are still to be Prime Minister in any of the Caribbean islands, you become mad, quite frankly. And this is the kind of thing that can happen to you. No one would have attempted to do that to him while he was Prime Minister of the country. But nonetheless, it's being done now. As to the media's interest in the matter, my sense is that the publicity of the court filings and the nature of the issue being presented is essentially information that future voters will take note of. I mean, we can't help but them having them take note of it because it speaks to an individual. And one could argue that if an individual is willing to behave a particular way towards his wife, goodness knows what he will do in relation to the others. The challenge is that we don't know the context. We don't know the context within which all of these things are happening. We don't know the other side of the story. And unfortunately, we're not going to hear them in this side. So in matters like this, as was the case with Owen Arthur, I felt that the media did enough to present this information in the public domain. The voters will be guided accordingly. And at that point, there's probably no reason to further hammer the issue because it's an uncomfortable situation for him. And I don't know that he needs to be made any less comfortable. Now, the previous conversation you were having when you were told, don't go there, I think that was a different scenario because that spoke to a situation in which he was prime minister of the country. There were questions being raised about an alternative first lady playing a particular role in terms of the governance of their affairs. And I think that was a reasonable and legitimate question to ask. The question now is that he's no longer prime minister. And if he's having a domestic issue, should he not be entitled to have a domestic issue in pretty much the same way that, many of us have other domestic issues and are allowed so to do? So that's my sense of it, yeah.
But one may say, though, that public figures, celebrities, people who are well known, their business, it's just the public has a huge appetite for the public, people just have a huge appetite for other people's private business anyhow. And there he is, a larger than life figure that the public, while some people are quarreling and saying, well, why are you minding his business? People are soaking it up. People want to know what's going on with him, just by virtue of who he is.
And to that extent, the information is in the public domain, and I think the public can consume it as they see fit. We had a situation where a prime minister was accused of rape, and the circumstances of that accusation were also very salacious. I mean, I'm sure you read it, and it was never published in any newspaper, but it made its rounds across the region, and all of us read it, and all of us were sufficiently entertained by what this prime minister was allegedly unable to do and why. Now, I think that, to me, if the information is there and the public consumes it however they will, they can make their decision on that. So my thing is the extent to which these things need to be discussed within the legitimate political discourse, like on a program like this, as distinct from focusing on other issues in relation to, Dr. Mitchell has some challenges within the NDC that are legitimate challenges. Should he, in the NNP, sorry, legitimate challenges. Well, to me, let's focus on those and let's leave the other matters of, his personal challenges. Let's leave them to settle themselves as time passes.
Those with a laser view internally, and in Grenada that is, believe that some of the challenges of the NNP stem from some of the activities that's taking place in his private life. That he may have people who are so close to him, who are advising him, who are influencing, who have a tremendous amount of influence, who are leading him down a path that is not good for him, but more specifically, not good for the party.
So the question is, if I advise Prime Minister Mitchell, the incumbent, if I advise Prime Minister Mitchell badly, and Prime Minister Mitchell makes bad decisions based on the advice I'm giving him, is it necessary for the public to inquire into the nature of the relationship with myself and Prime Minister Mitchell? Or is it more important for the public to focus on the fact that he's being badly advised? We had a situation where Patrick Manning was being advised. He's now a blessed memory, so I can speak to the matter. He was being advised by a priest to do all kinds of ridiculous things. The priest apparently advised him to call an election, and he did so, and he was beaten badly. Now, the point I'm making is that when a situation like that occurs, references to the role that the priest was playing and the private audience that they had and the fella pray and give him bush bath and this kind of thing, all of that is, to me, is salacious stuff, which is entertaining And I, like anybody else, like to laugh at these things. But I don't really know that the public, legitimate public discourse needs to be about that. What it really was about the fact that you had a prime minister who won many major political battles, and he was essentially being badly advised and making a lot of foolish decisions. So the conversations that he was having in relation to the management of affairs at the state housing corporation, which is one of the issues that Keith Rowley raised, that was the issue. The fact that he was saying, that he needed to retreat to pray at a particular point in time, that's the issue. The question as to who is advising him, I don't really know that is relevant in this kind of typical political discourse. It's relevant outside. And if you look at the American elections, they dig up a lot into the private issues of politicians. And I get that that's their tradition. And I don't necessarily know that is the kind of tradition that we will follow, because we've never been like that in the Caribbean. We are closer to the French, where, matters
we are
of...
not. We are not. And those types of things don't seem to have much of an impact on one's candidacy and one's political career. Those domestic issues and personal issues.
And that's...
They discuss, but not... they do not influence the way voters go.
And that's why I said I think that we're closer to the French in that in the French context, morality stops at the bedroom door, right? So we are not interested. You had a former president of France just recently who was having an extramarital affair, notwithstanding the fact that the person who was first lady was not even his wife. He was married to somebody else. So is a third time horny scenario. And it went on, and people were concerned about the fact that he would leave the Elysee Palace and go to see this lady on a moped, and that he didn't have security. They were concerned about that. But the question as to the right of him to go and see this lady and carry baguettes in the morning, nobody wasn't taking that on. And that to me is really where it goes. I do not think that the Caribbean public is genuinely interested from a political, analytical perspective in those kinds of issues. I think that the bad decisions, and if this lady is indeed advising him badly, as I believe she probably is, he has to be held to account. But there's a whole lot that we can hold Dr. Mitchell to account for now in relation to what's going on within the NNP, in relation to what happened, what precipitated the outcome of the last election, and indeed what will happen going forward. That I don't know that we need to muddy the waters with this kind of thing, which, as I said, the declaration is out there in the public domain, the filing. Ultimately, the court will have to determine what happens going forward. And the public will know, the chips will fall where they may. As I said, does it tell you things about an individual that you may or may not have known? Clearly it does. And I think that the public would also be guided accordingly. It's interesting when the issue with Gonzalez took place, which was the first scandal, not the second. The first scandal in relation to this allegation of rape. He won the election after it. And it was painfully obvious that the vast majority of people didn't believe that there was anything in it other than the salacious stuff that it was intended to be. I would say Exhibit A. And I suspect that there are many people in Grenada who probably would view the situation similarly, who may very well not have been surprised, and who would support him nonetheless, because in the final analysis, you're not voting for a pastor, you're voting for somebody to run your affairs.
And certainly the issues that the party has to face, the hill that the party has to climb, that is not necessarily going to, but that is probably not going to have any bearing on it.
Mm-hmm. No, in my view, it probably will have very little bearing on it. He will win his seat handily, and in our system, there is no facility for public expression of dissent within a leader outside of a public opinion poll. So once he wins his seat, he's at the table, and the situation continues.
You said morality stops at the bedroom door in the Caribbean, but I wonder if that makes a deeper statement about us. Than it might be a good thing because you don't want your business out there, but we are so tolerant of accusations of domestic violence and domestic abuse and sexual assault by electing people to our parliament. who may be so accused. It's a
But
tolerance that is frightening and goes beyond. I mean, this is some of the stuff that, it's a guy has an affair, is one thing, but we're talking about the Gonzalez situation, the allegations that were made, and here he is still. People worrying about when he's going to leave. It doesn't seem to be in a position where he has to go anywhere. Does it say?
But I don't know that we are peculiar Callistra in that regard because I made reference to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I don't believe that there are many of our Caribbean politicians, male or female, who are paragons of virtue. And the reality is that many of them do things everyone else does. So are we to hold them to a different standard because they're leaders in their own right? Of course, I am of the opinion that we in the Caribbean are far too tolerant of domestic, not only domestic violence, but domestic misbehavior. And certainly the research that I have done on that for other agencies in the NGO community has suggested that we have a problem in the Caribbean with domestic misbehavior. And yes, we are far too tolerant about it. Some time ago, I did a survey in Barbados that showed in the year prior, we had more than 33% of households in which there were cases of domestic violence, a single instance of domestic violence. This is totally inappropriate. The point is that when you have that kind of rate, why should you not think at some time in time that a politician will get involved in that? And do you hold them to a higher standard than the standard to which you hold yourself as a society? So these are the kinds of questions that I think I need to ask. And then I look at the situation in Italy, with Prime Minister Berlusconi, who is also now in loving memory, although some may argue that the memory is not so loving. But I can't think of an individual who was more scandalous and had, affairs and women and used state resources to bring in the women. I mean, the lady, Ruby the Heartbreaker, who was supposed to have been a prostitute. The nature of the claim was that she was brought in using state resources for a bunga bunga party, and I mean, it outrages a section of Italian society. But I think another section of Italian society say, look, if you are going to do the job that you're supposed to do, and so on. And I have heard people who were outraged by, because you're familiar with my Italian connections, they're outraged by the Bunga Bunga Party scandal of Berlusconi. And now they look at the current Prime Minister of Italy, who has some extremely right-wing views and has taken negative positions in relation to immigrants and also in relation to abortion. That people are far more concerned about than the fact that Berlusconi had young girls, So these are the kinds of conversations that I think, as I said, we have to be very careful about. And I do believe that we have a problem in the Caribbean where this kind of behavior is concerned. We have a problem where men often use their position and their influence to have a way with women. And I think that women are often taken advantage of. And then in some instances,
the power dynamic, it really is a problem. I hear so many stories, even stories related to the current leader of the opposition that we won't go into here now for fear of it being actionable. But the power dynamic is it's just abused in the Caribbean.
But yeah, and I agree with you. But I'm saying if we are gonna be fair and address this issue across the board, from the time we are in schools, and you had an excellent program in Grenada where you were attempting, with the assistance of an NGO, to go into Grenadian primary and secondary schools to teach young girls and boys how to speak to one another, how to respect each other. And I'm saying that if we're gonna get it on the ground floor and we're gonna change those behavioral relations from that level, then it will help, because ultimately
then that's a conversation worth happening. Right. So that, and even if we lose these generations, I think so, we can catch the next 10 generations that's coming.
But I'm just concerned that we are imposing behavioral expectations on persons that lead us that we are not prepared to impose on ourselves. And just bear in mind that we have a society in the Caribbean where the vast majority of us are born out of wedlock. The reality is that most of us have been come into this world through relations that were outside of any kind of marital union, and in some instances that were going on while there were relations in a marital union and not necessarily with that person. We come out of a society in which we don't have a tradition of Mr. and Mrs. within the context of our political relations, so the president and the first lady and whatnot, that doesn't really hold true because there was not a lot of expectations in terms of Caribbean leaders. When you see them travel, the vast majority don't travel with their wives if they do have them. And then you have places like St. Kitts and Nevis where we've never had a married prime minister in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But there are interesting scenarios in which you have, countries which for a long time have had prime ministers that were not married. And indeed, in the case of Grenada, your prime minister was married for all intents and purposes. But I think that you're now realizing that it is for all intents and purposes. So I do feel that we have bigger fish to fry. And I'm saying gender, let's get on with the conversation about improving gender relations. The politics, let's get on with the conversation about improving power relations, but let's not muddy the waters by assuming that there's this intricate relation, because it's none of us are angels, and I certainly can't judge because I know that I too have sinned, come short of the glory, so to speak.
We all have.
But Peter, I'm being a body though.
Good for you. But Peter, there's also the situation where these politicians, these leaders can use the position they have. An ordinary guy gets into the system for wrongdoing, the system will deal with him. Regular people can get into the system. Society and the law holds us to a particular standard that the power of these people sometimes can cause them to escape from the point of view that may never be reported, or the police may never bother to investigate it because it's a leader. So there are two standards in some instances there.
That, Callistra, is not untrue, and I think that is an issue about which we need to be concerned. But in relation to this particular issue, I think what you have is a reverse scenario, because had Mrs. Mitchell been a regular citizen of Grenada, and she had filed something like this in the courts of law, no one would ever have known or noticed. But the issue is an issue simply because of who she's married to. So to me, that's a reverse part of the problem. And in the same way, Oinatha's divorce occurred after a long period of time when he and the wife were living apart for all intents and purposes. And, nobody would have known because people get divorced in the United States of America all the time. But people became aware simply because of who he was. And as I said, I have seen depositions, which are made publicly in relation to people that were divorced in Barbados, where domestic violence is alleged, where impotence is alleged, and sexual indiscretion is alleged. And these things are never make their way into the public domain simply because no one knows who the politician is. So I'm saying the person is. So I'm saying you ought to be fair, because in some instances, things are swept under the carpet because a politician has the capacity to pick up the phone and call someone and say, look, this is not news. The reality, however, is that the power that Prime Minister Mitchell had in that regard to say to you not to go there has ceased to exist. And now any and everyone can go there. So in a sense, there's a defiance of that argument, that there's all of this power attached. So you have to take it in stride, my sense.
All right, Peter, let's take a break here for a moment and come right back. So I want to pick your brain about the regional perspective, regional view on the issue in Palestine. This is The Narrative. Back in a moment.